Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Region Queens Municipality Regular Council meeting Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. It is 6 p.m. I would like to just note that QCCR Media is doing an audio recording, and there is an addition to the agenda of 9.3 contract negotiations. And with that, I would ask, are there any other changes to the agenda? If not, I would ask for approval of the agenda, moved by Councillor Charlton, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Passed. 3.0, no presentations. 4.0, are there any petitions to table today? 5.0, public question comment session. Any guests who wish to address council, please address them from the stand there and give your name and your civic address, and each person would have 5 minutes. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment today? Anyone from the public who wishes to comment? Seeing none, I will move to approval of the minutes, regular council February 13th, 2024, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Gidney. All those in favor? Passed. Recommendation 7.1, bylaw number 14, tax exemption. There is a recommendation within the package. Councillor Brown.
I recommend that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality give first reading to bylaw number 14 respecting tax exemptions as amended.
Seconded by Councillor Charlton. Ms. Vino.
Since last year's review and approval of the tax exemption bylaw, requests have been made by council members and the mayor to add certain properties to our tax exemption list. The properties are listed in Schedule A. Medway Area Heritage Society is requesting exemption for Seeley Hall. The Mechanics Lodge has also been added, but there's a small matter with PVSC that we're waiting for a name change on that to finalize it. Staff did some research regarding housing because Queens Neighborhood Cooperative Housing Limited has asked for an exemption. Currently, this property is assessed as vacant land, so granting an exemption has a cost of only $255. But if you look at the report under applicable legislation, it clearly states that property of a nonprofit, community, charitable, fraternal, educational, recreational, religious, cultural, or sporting organization, if in the opinion of the council, the organization provides a service that might otherwise be the responsibility of council, and typically housing has not been, so staff have not added that to the list. And we also this year removed Heinz Pro Glide Limited because at the time that the staff report was written, their registration for joint stock companies has lapsed.
I would like to make a few other comments. I reviewed the list looking at the fact that nonprofit organizations on this list are supposed to be current with joint stocks. And just by doing a simple check through joint stocks, I found at least a dozen that were not. However, they've been on this list for several years. I've had a discussion with our CAO, and it was our feeling that because they've been on this list for so long, many of them, and they've not kept up their joint stocks, that council may consider for this year allowing them to remain, but looking at a new set of rules respecting how one gets on that tax exemption list, such as making application every year, supplying a valid registration from joint stocks. So I'm just putting that out there for you to be aware that there's many on this list that are not current, or they've been in default for over 20 years with joint stocks, or joint stocks have simply taken them off. They've been struck off. So just for your information, many of them are some of the very small community halls that are basically not being used. Just putting that out there for discussion.
Some of them, I had a call from a few of them, and they're telling me that the joint stock is asking for some forms to be filled out, and until they fill out the forms, they said that they've been taken off the joint stock. I don't know if that's some of the ones that you looked at, but they said that, you know, they want how much land they own and everything else, and a lot of people haven't got that done yet. So that seems to be a problem with some of the joint stock people. They say that they paid it, but the joint stock is holding the money back until they fill this asset management, I guess it is.
We just had a report of one that they have lapsed. And how are we going to look at if one lapses and the others we're going to exempt? I mean, that puts us into I think, kind of a bad spot if we don't try to do something that will fit everyone.
If I could, in relation to the Heinz Pro Guide, there is also stipulations within their lease that a current museum is operational. That was the reason that a commercial company was provided tax exemption that is usually only given to nonprofit groups. Are there any other comments? Councillor Brown?
I know we have discussion that we don't do housing, but I'm curious how the assisted living is housing. How does that fall in under that? Queens Assisted Living, or Queens Association for Supported Living is housing, I believe.
That was something that was done before my time, so you'd have to ask for, I can certainly go back and look in the minutes, but that's been on the list since my manager of finance has been here, so we're talking 6 or 7 years, so we can certainly go back and look if you wish.
Are there any other comments?
The reason I ask about the housing is the Baptist Church in Greenfield had called to see if they could get a tax exemption for their parsonage for the minister because they own it, but it's not taken because it's housing. So, but it's owned by the church, which is a nonprofit. So I wasn't sure how that worked.
I do know in the past there has been discussion about manses or parsonages owned by churches, and they've always never been considered as church property.
Thank you. I think too, it would make sense to have a little bit more clarification moving forward for the next year. I think it would be unreasonable to think that we could get this sorted in that short of a time frame, but I think moving forward, it would make sense just to make sure that some of these are vetted and that they're fair and equitable.
Are there any other questions before I call for the question? If not, I'll call for the question on first reading. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. Area rate request 7.2. There is a recommendation within the package.
I move that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality receive the report titled February 2024 Area Rate Request for Information, and that Council consider approving the community area rates as presented at the March 12th Council meeting.
Seconded by Councillor Gidney. Questions or comments? Councillor Romero.
As we had seen at the meeting and the vote last March, It was overwhelming support for both organizations to have the area rate. Both organizations are doing wonderful projects. Brooklyn Recreation has done a lot of work to their lighting at the Hank Snow Playground and also at the Waterfront Park. And they are doing many upgrades to the Hank Snow Playground as well. And the Brooklyn Cemetery Association are also doing many updates with benches and backfilling and whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you, Count.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused why we're bringing this back for March 12th when it's under our recommendations, not discussion. Normally when we do recommendations, we vote on them and accept them in the meeting that they're brought in.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think if council wants to make the decision today, they're certainly welcome to do so. I think there was maybe a lack of clarity about whether council wanted to discuss this further or whether it was recommendations. So, but yeah, you can do either.
To Councillor Amaro. Councillor Amaro, you made the motion. You can either withdraw that motion with your seconder, or you can wait until the March 12th meeting as the motion stated. What would you prefer?
I'd like to go ahead if possible.
So you will have to withdraw your motion with consent of your seconder. And then you may make a new motion removing the word consider in that council approve the area rate request as presented. Councillor Charlton, Councillor Romero.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality receive the report titled February 2024 Area Rate Request for Information, and that Council approve the area rate as presented at the March 12th Council meeting. Oh, we're doing tonight? Okay. At tonight's meeting.
Seconded by Councillor Gidney. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. Electronic voting and appointment of returning officer. Item 7.3. I would like to suggest that we break these motions into two motions. The first being a simple motion that the Council of Region of Queens receive the report titled Electronic Voting and Appointment of Returning Officer, and we do the same for all the future motions coming forward. We just, because there is not a question that we've not received the report, but if we were to defeat any of these motions, then we're basically defeating the fact that we've received the report. So it's just clarity. So if someone would make the beginning of that motion, please, Councillor Deputy Mayor Field.
Okay, so I'm only doing the first part. You're going to have three different motions, or just the other two is going to be together. Okay. I so recommend that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality receive the report titled Electronic Voting and Appointment of Returning Officer.
And that is seconded by Councillor Gidney. Any discussion on the report? Not all have a question that we've received the report. All those in favor? Passed. And then the remaining. Deputy Mayor Fancy.
I so recommend that Ian Kent be appointed the 2024 Region of Queens Returning Officer, and that staff be directed to implement the hybrid voting solution as outlined.
And that's seconded by Councillor Charlton. Discussion on the motion, please. and some background, perhaps CAO Jodry?
Yeah, I think I think my recommendation to you is what I heard, that there was probably some level of interest in electronic voting. I think the number of municipalities that are participating in some form of electronic voting, you'd be one of the few that weren't doing something. So and really an electronic only version, unless you're willing not to have polling stations, or if that's where you want to go, then it's pretty much a hybrid option is sort of the way you got to go. So yeah, that's really the crux of what my recommendation is. If you want to consider electronic voting, you probably need to do a hybrid.
So for clarity of those in our viewing audience, the hybrid option would allow voters to either vote electronically or on paper. The cost for this would be the typical election costs, approximately $50,000 for 2024, plus the electronic voting system, which is approximately $20,000. So we'll be looking at budgeting approximately $70,000 for the upcoming fall election. Discussion?
Yeah, are we gonna have the same number of polling stations? I can't remember when we had our discussion. Is there a limited number of polling stations where we're gonna be electronic?
Through the mayor, yeah, our intent would be to bring a report back in March on that topic, but essentially, yeah, I think we'd be proposing the same number of polling stations. No material change there, but that does need to be a decision of council. And I guess my intent was, ideally, we would have a returning officer who would sort of bring that recommendation to council. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments, Councillor Charlton?
The way that I read this report, I understood if it was the hybrid option that we would have the regular polling stations that we've had in the past. So I certainly think that that's important. I think people need to be able to feel comfortable voting in their areas, and whether that's going out and doing a paper ballot or being able to do the option electronically. I had a few people in 2020 who weren't going to be present and weren't comfortable with the proxy vote. So that electronic part would solve that. And I think that it's not a substantial cost in the grand scheme of things, above and beyond what we typically do. And I think it makes sense. So I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
And just a bit of further, many people will know of Ted Bully, who's been returning officer for the Region of Queens in municipal, federal, provincial elections for many, many years. He's since retired. And Ian Kent has been appointed as a returning officer for the provincial government and the upcoming, it's assumed, the upcoming federal election. So for that reason, it only seemed to make sense that he continue on as our returning officer. And is there any other discussion before I ask for the question? If not, I will ask for the question. All those in favor? Passed. Liverpool Library next steps. And again, two motions, please. The first, just basically a motion that we've received the report.
I move that the Council of the Region of Queens of Municipality receive the report titled Liverpool Library Next Steps.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion on that motion? If not, I'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Passed. And the remainder? Councillor Muse?
I move and that the staff be directed to commence renovations of the vacant space of the Liverpool Business Development Center with a budget of $1,050,000 plus a 20% contingency funded from the gas tax, but need official name remain.
I need to interrupt for a moment. Canada Community Building Fund. It's not there. So Councillor Muse.
Instead of gas tax?
Canada Community Building Fund. comma, remainder from accumulated surplus.
Canada Community Building Fund. All right. I move that the staff be directed to commence renovations of the vacant space of the Liverpool Business Development Center with a budget of $1,050,000 plus a 20% contingency funded from the Canada Community Fund and the remainder from the accumulated surplus. And that the staff be directed to collaborate with the library board and senior staff to create a consultation plan as outlined and presented to the council for approval, and that the Liverpool Library be relocated to the Liverpool Business Development Center by December 2024, and that notice of this decision be given to the South Shore Library Board.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. Discussion, please.
So what's the gas tax is now really called the Canada Community Fund? Okay.
This has been a long process, to say the least, but I think our CAO has come to a conclusion with these first steps and the next steps. I think it's the best solution right now for the library services to continue in Queens County. I know that our staff and our CAO will work closely with the CEO of the library to give them what they need down here in the Liverpool Business Development Center. And I am happy with the next steps to move on to the future of the library and the future build. It's been quite a process, but I think we just need to overhaul a little bit and move on. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yeah, I think the meeting that CAO Jodrey had with all the individuals really focused things, and now that we can see that the light at the end of the tunnel is not a oncoming train. So I think we're back on track a little bit there. I'd personally like to see the consultation started sooner rather than later, so that even though this council won't see the project through to the end, if the information is there for the incoming council, that they have something to work with, not to start off, because new councils are overwhelmed with learning how to be councillors, with learning how to do things, and the less things we can throw at them, the better. So I would personally love to see the consultation process started before this council ends, so that we can give them a firm basis to make a decision, whatever they want to do.
Other comments? Councillor Charlton?
I am also happy with the next steps. I guess my concern for what Councillor Brown had mentioned, although I think the intent makes sense, is that a new council could completely change the engagement plan that we support, and so I think that it makes sense what's been proposed here by the CAO. That there's been some hard feelings obviously with this, and I think that the new council who comes in the fall, who are here for the next 4 years, should be a part of this to make sure that the engagement plan is also what they expect, so that it's not something that is potentially taken away and have to redo it again. Thank you.
Other comments? I guess my comment would echo that of Councillor Brown's. If we were to begin a consultation process on site selection, library needs, etc., it would be completed and provide homework or information for an incoming council. Also, you'll notice in this report that there is discussion of community fundraising that will be required for a new library. Libraries are funded through the the Department of Community Culture and Heritage have funded libraries in the past. They've funded HRM's library and they've funded other libraries. If the new council were to need more money than the $3 million that we had earmarked for a library, then they would be unable to reach that community culture and heritage in time to get in their 25-26 budget. I also personally believe that the property where the current library sits could have been affordably purchased by the region, and with future plans of at least keeping the library intact there until a developer could be found to put housing on that location. However, it was not a wish of council to do that. So for that reason, this seems to be our plan, is to outfit the business development center as a temporary measure. And one would hope that during that refit, that the CEO of the library and the library staff are consulted very closely, and that we're simply not creating office space, because it's my feeling that once the library's there, the library will stay there. It would be very difficult for a future council to justify $1 million plus on renovation and then flip around to build a new library. So I just want to ensure that if the temporary location becomes a permanent location, that care and planning was put into the redesign of that space. Any other comments? Hearing none, I will ask for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. Brooklyn Recreation notice to reader reimbursement, 7.5.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality reimburse the amount of $1,150 to Brooklyn Recreation.
And that's seconded by Councillor Gidney. A bit of background, please. CEO Jodry?
Sorry, I got caught up in a thought. Yeah, I this is, I think the councillor asked for this to be considered by council, so that's why this is here, and certainly you're welcome to discuss and debate and make the decision.
Questions or comments? Councillor Romero?
We started with this revisions to this area rate policy in April of last year. We expected to get it completed within a couple of months, but we lost our clerk and our CAO, and things did not go as planned. But because of the timeline that the new revisions was passed, I'm asking that council reimburse Brooklyn Recreation for the amount for the notice to reader, which does not have to now be completed. There's no need for the notice to reader on the new area rate policy revisions that we have done.
Are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Fancy, would you take the chair, please? While I realize the amount is small, $1,150 to Brooklyn Rec, I'm also cognizant of the fact that we have just approved an area rate for them this year, which will give them in excess of $32,000, which was last year's money. And also, when you look at their balance sheet, they also have $29,000 sitting in assets left over from last year. So they use the area rate, but they still have almost $30,000 in a bank. So it's not the matter of the money, it's the principle of the fact that this group certainly does not illustrate the need to have that money reimbursed, and we have awarded an area rate to them for this year, knowing that they do have 30,000 in a bank account that remained unused from last year and previous years. So I will not support this request, even though it is minor.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, when I look at this, like the mayor says, this is not a huge amount of money. When the area request went in, part of the cost of the area of the budget was for the notice to reader. Now, they don't need it. It's happened late, but it was something that they budgeted for. And if we give them the extra money right now, that's going to come from all areas of the county. So every resident in the county is basically subsidizing Greenfield or Brooklyn Recreation an extra $1,000. It's not a huge amount of money. It works out to about 10 cents for each person, but it's a slippery slope to start. And like I say, it was already budgeted for, so it was money that would just be extra. So I'm not in favor.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to comment? Councillor Miro?
They also do not get, they have to have money in there for operating as well, because they do not get their first payment from the region until June, I believe it is, or July. I'm not sure which date.
Okay, Councillor Muse?
I think I'm lost. So the $1,150, they don't have to do it ever? They don't have to put this in? So I was really lost on taking the money and giving it back, and how Council Brown said it's going to be affected by everybody. If they put this money in and they don't have to, then we're just giving back their money. It's not going to affect anybody else in the region. So if they don't have to get this in, why are we even arguing with this? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Give them back the money.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, they've already spent the money, so we're reimbursing them out of general operating funds. So that money does come from all taxpayers in the county. So they'll get their full area rate request. They've spent money. We're going to give them more money on top of the area rate request, and that extra money comes from every taxpayer in the county.
Okay, any more questions on this? Councillor Gidney's call for question. Okay, Councillor.
So just to clarify, this area rate, everything was changed about it, as Councillor Miro had previously said, and they, under the, I guess it was the first proposed, that they would have had to have their notice to reader, I think it was by January 15th, so previously, before it was changed. So they went ahead and did that, because in November, I don't know if it was tabled or what it was, but it was not ready to be adopted by us. So had we had our clerk and CAO previously and been able to have that done, Brooklyn Area Rec would have never had to submit a notice to reader. It happened, our new area rate, I'm struggling with the words, but the new, I guess, way that they have to file for area rates doesn't make them do that unless they, I think it was over, if it was over 50,000, then they had to meet a certain criteria. So they're under the 50,000. So this community group would not have had to expend the $1,000 if we would have had this dealt with a few weeks prior. So that was why, was my understanding, that we discussed this at the last meeting, and then we brought it back forward to reimburse them because we didn't have it together in time. Thank you.
Okay, are there any more comments before we go to the question? If so, All in favor? Contrary minded? 5-3 passed.
Eight point one, Core Active Transportation Network Project. This is in discussion, so we'll leave the recommendation for the end. Ms. Halliday.
Recommendation?
Hello. So yes, this is the Core Active Transportation Network project. And just for anybody in the room, active transportation is any human-powered activity like walking, cycling, wheelchairs, scooters. Just as a little bit of a background, I applied for Cycle Nova Scotia to come do a Core AT network plan. And they'll come in, kind of do community engagement, focus groups, have surveys, and then they design reports and send that back to us. And they have estimations with those reports as well, just a cost estimate of all AT infrastructure that comes from the plan. And town of Lunenburg, Mahone Bay, Antigonish are just a few examples of people who have gone through this recently.
Any questions on Ms. Halliday? Councillor Gidney?
Initially, this is just so we can get a feel for it, get some additional information before we actually spend any money. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So yeah, they come in, they do the whole plan up, and so we get a lengthy report kind of saying from the community engagement what people would like to see and what infrastructure should be implemented. And so there's no budgetary costs for the initial plan.
Sort of, except for staff time, which could be your time. Is that correct? So there's not going to involve anyone else, just you.
That's okay. It'll involve some conversations with planning and public works and even economic development as well. Very minimal, yeah. Just mainly my time, yeah.
Ms. Halliday, it's great to see you involved in active transportation. When I read this, my only concern was we know that the Queens County ATV Association are coming forward very shortly there's a meeting soon, and there are specific parts of the Trestle Trail and other trails that they have expressed a clear interest in. So I would be nervous if during the community consultation those trails were identified by the public to be active transportation trails, because if they're active transportation trails, they cannot be multi-use trails for ATVs. So rather than get in a position whereby after the community consultation the community decides that the Trestle Bridge and the Trestle Trail would be great to see improved active transportation on, then we're going to run into a direct conflict with the ATV Association, because motorized vehicles, with the exception of e-bikes, are not allowed to be part of active transportation networks. That is what I understood to be from. They can act multi-use.
I'll go first and then you can go. No, are you saying that's from your understanding of what I said? No, that's not correct. Kim will explain.
So active transportation can be housed on multi-use trails, so ATVs can continue to go on them. There might this is kind of just an idea, but they might just have like speed limits within those areas. So kind of looking at that and looking at the whole of the multi-use trail system. Yeah.
I was misinformed, or I read something incorrectly, because I had thought that they were only money for active, if you apply for money for active transportation trails, but I was wrong. So we'll just take that out of my comments.
I will just say also, so through the funding, if it's for active transportation, it does kind of have that pedestrian cyclist lens on it. So it wouldn't be like, oh, we're going to put gates up. If it's a multi-use trail, it's just gonna ensure that it's safe for pedestrians and cyclists and stuff, and it's graded properly and stuff like that.
Thanks for that clarification. And there is a recommendation now that we've heard this for our next meeting. Councillor Brown?
You know, I think this is a great idea to move forward because we're a very widespread, diverse community, and we don't have a lot of connections. And I think if we can forge those connections and make them, if they can use the multi-use trails, we know that the ATV Association keeps up their trails, and as long as they use a proper coating material, that they're really good for bicycling and walking, and the ones that they do use and maintain are probably the best trails we have in the area. So I'm kind of excited about this whole project, and I'm looking forward to seeing it going forward. Thank you.
There is a recommendation to bring it forward to our next meeting. Councillor Charlton?
I move that council receives Core Active Transportation Network project information and that council consider endorsing the Core Active Transportation Network project at their meeting March 12, 2024.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Passed. 8.2, the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities is having an upcoming spring conference, and it is in, I believe, Bedeck. In order to prepare a recommendation for the following meeting, I simply need a show of hands of councillors who would be interested in attending that NSFM conference in Bedeck, which is scheduled for May 8th to May the 10th. So we have Councillor Brown, Councillor Muse, and Councillor Charlton. You'll be attending because there'll be an NSFM meeting as well. Any other people who are interested in attending? If not, if staff wish to make a note of that there are 3 councillors, Councillor Brown, Councillor Muse, and Councillor Charlton, who are interested in attending the NSFM Spring Conference in Bedeck. Thank you. And 8.3 is public engagement. It was prepared by CAO Jodry. So if you wish to go over this public engagement framework, and then we'll just make a recommendation that we accept it, and then we'll direct further staff for further work.
Through you, Mayor. I had, since starting this position, heard a lot of interest in trying to engage the public more on various matters, and so really this is just providing a very rough outline, give you a sense of what public engagement could look like, and that not all public engagement is the same. For example, informing the public, consulting the public, empowering the public, these are all different activities with different expectations. And sort of, these are sort of considered the bit of a standard of the way to think about the difference in the different types of public engagement. So I wanted to put this in front of council to understand, are they formally interested in having a framework around how public engagement is done on various things? And so what that might look like, in essence, is you know, for this type of decision or this type of work, this is the type of public engagement that you would do as a sort of a standard practice, is what the idea of public engagement framework would be. Or maybe council doesn't want to do that, which is fine too. But this is really just trying to put this in front of you to understand where you land on this topic, so understand how to go forward.
Discussion?
I think it's a great idea to develop a framework so that we know going forward what public engagement looks like. We've been all over the board trying to hit public engagement, and sometimes we've been successful, sometimes we haven't. But I think if we had a framework so that we knew what we wanted to do from the start, then we'd have better expectations about where we wanted to end up when we're done. So I think it's a great idea to have something developed.
I guess my question is, when you look at the chart, and CAO Jodry alludes to the chart, there's a public participation goal, and often when you engage and empower your public, you will see that it sometimes will lead, just so you are aware, that the final decision making rests in the hands of the public. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that, and CA Jodry and I had that conversation. It's very rare that a council ever leaves the final decision to the hands of the public. But sometimes that's what the public expect when you engage them. So just I mean, council cannot give, let's say, a committee the power to spend council money, but council can, if it so wishes, give a committee or the public the right to make a final decision, as long as it doesn't land on money. And I think that's the chart that's included in our package, just so you know that the increasing impact, I believe it's right and it's just to engage our public as much as we can, to hear what they say and to hear their opinion. But as we all know, often, sometimes the public from which input the most, who are the most affected, sometimes they're not happy with the decision council reaches. But that is simply a matter of government. We've seen that recently in our provincial government. So it's often you can set up the committees and engage, but just, I think it's a good thing to do, but just to be aware that may be a situation that you find yourself in. But the council at the time would deal with it then. But public engagement is something that we all have heard. The public want more engagement stuff. Councillor Charlton.
Thank you. I think that's important to have that framework so we can see what that looks like, because we really don't know at this point. Council does at the end of the day get to decide, but it is up to us to listen to our residents and take those concerns, because sometimes the information that you have isn't being looked at through a certain lens or a certain perspective. So I think, if I'm thinking back to the past with budget, for example, when we first came in on this council, budget meetings weren't recorded. We started recording them, but there was no framework or policy that said it was. So then the next year, I had brought it up, are we recording it again? So I think these are all things that would be captured in the framework to make sure that we have those community engagement pieces and what that looks like. So I'm supportive of that. Thanks.
Yes, I like the idea of more public engagement, and again, as our mayor has mentioned, we ultimately it's going to have to be back to our decisions where things have been done will be done. But I think we've missed the points over the years with we don't always know what the needs are, and we miss that. We've had businesses leave and we don't even know why they're leaving, or or maybe something that we could have been part of or tried to help make it better, or maybe it's not nothing we can do, but I know when I go around talking to different businesses around town, they say, well, you know, everybody's got a different need. And maybe it's a townhouse meetings or something, whichever may be part of this engagement, that we can be able to find out what it could be parking, it could be, even like we're saying with our intersections or anything, could be, let's find out what their needs are. So it's hard to address a need if you don't know what the needs are.
Any other comments? There was a recommendation in this paper. Councillor Brown?
I recommend that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality receive the report titled Public Engagement Framework, and that staff be directed to develop a public engagement framework for Council's consideration.
Seconded by Councillor Charlton. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Carried. A motion to move in camera, please. Moved by Councillor Gidney, seconded by Councillor Romero. All those in favor? We're back out of in camera, and there is one item that requires a recommendation. Who would like to make the recommendation? Councillor Brown?
I recommend that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality approves the amended lease clauses as presented and authorizes Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer to sign the amended lease agreement for the remainder of the term.
Seconded by Councillor Romero. And for our viewing audience, the remainder of the term is December 31st, 2024. Some of the changes were a reduction in the rent that the Region of Queens pays. Furnace oil invoices will be paid by the tenant, which is the Region of Queens, for the library space for the downstairs. Region of Queens were responsible for cleaning the library space and snow clearing. And the lease expires December 31st, 2024. Is there any discussion or questions? It will keep us there until then. Now I'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. And the meeting is adjourned.